Hey guys, welcome back, or welcome for the first time if you're new. In today's video, I thought it would be kind of a cool idea to go through some of my current art journals. In my last video, I talked a little bit about my journal process and how I tend to work in more than one journal at the same time. And so here, I actually have 6 journals, and these are the ones I am currently working in. I have other unfinished journals that I have not gotten around to actually completing all of the pages in, thus the inspiration for my last video. But for now, these are kind of the ones I'm focusing on. So the first one I kind of want to show you here is the one that I focused on in my last video. And that is why it still has all of these little post-it notes in it. And I don't know if I really am going to do a full flip through of all of these journals or not, but the general idea here is that this one is probably the closest to being finished out of all of my journals. This is one of my favorite pages here. I don't know why I like it so much. It's quite different than a lot of my typical journal pages, which tend to be a little bit more simple, I suppose. But I really like all of the texture and details that are on this spread. I also quite like this one. This was one of the pages that I finished in the last video. And as you can see, this one is just pretty close to being done. So that's about it for this journal. Next, I am going to show you this little tiny journal. I created this one last month, back in August, and the idea behind it was to essentially create a binding tutorial for a Coptic stitch binding for my Patreon page, and this was my little sample. I had done Coptic stitch bindings before, but never this size, so I don't know why I just felt the need to do one for myself as well. But this one doesn't really have that many finished pages in it. I've just painted some of the pages and added a few little sketches. This is probably one of the only pages that is actually finished that I remember. And I was experimenting a lot with greens in this journal. This paint here, let's see if I can get it to reflect in the light at all, has gold reflex in it. And this is actually one of my handmade watercolors. These are some little experiments I've been doing on my own time, and it is this one right here. So when I was creating those paints, a lot of my tools had the watercolor left on them, and so I cleaned off my brushes in quite a few of my different journals, and this was one of them. I quite like this figure, but there's something about this side of the page that doesn't quite feel finished to me yet. This was a hand-carved stamp that I made. I have been experimenting a little bit more with carving my own stamps lately. Pull out the drawer that they're in here. I have this one that I had done last month, as well as this little beetle. This is actually a new ink. I put this in here last night, actually. I just purchased this Liquitex acrylic ink in Vivid Lime Green. And my reasoning behind this was that my Patreon word of the month is cultivate. And to me, and due to the general definition of the word, it makes me think of plants, and I don't have any green inks or anything like that, so I wanted to add one to my collection. I have used Liquitex inks in the past. I have two, and this one I actually got in a sketch box a while back, and I really enjoyed working with it. So that might be something you will be seeing a little bit more of in the future. That is probably most of what's in here. This was a sample chart for my handmade watercolors. I was just kind of seeing what kind of variation I could get with the different colors. And a lot of these are reflective. They were the only ones I could really get to work without glycerin. And I have glycerin now, so I've been working with some of the matte paints now. But I do like the way that these particular ones turned out. As long as it has not sold out by now, I still have one little set of these watercolors left in my Etsy shop, and if they are still available, I will leave a link to them in the description of this video. And so that is it for this little guy. Now, the next one I want to show you does say summer 2012 on the cover, and the reasoning behind this was I've been sorting through some of my old bins and things and throwing a bunch of stuff away, and in one of those bins I found a bunch of my old art journals from not right when I started art journaling, but a little nearer when I started art journaling. So there are a few things in here. I don't really want to show all of my old art, but that's kind of what some of it looked like. But basically what I ended up finding is that in this journal, there's a lot of pages that are completely unfinished. I only did about that much in 2012. And so all the rest of this is just painted papers and that kind of thing from when I made the book. And so it just felt like a waste to let all of those pages just exist without anything on them. So I thought that I could sort of start working on this on and off. And this was the first page that I did in it. I don't really think that it's finished, but I do quite like it. And really that's about all I've done in this so far, except for I put some more of that lime green ink on this page and these marks. And I glued a piece from my September collage sheet over on Patreon down. And that's about it. So I've just kind of been thinking about using this more than actually using it, but I thought that I would include it because I'm still working in it. And I think that's a very good example of how the method that I use to work in my journals is very all over the place. The next little book I have here is just a 2-signature book that I did using a piece of a cereal box as the cover, and I sewed these signatures from painted papers and just little scraps generally. And so there is quite a bit done in this, but it's mostly in the first signature, or it's just a little all over the place and sporadic. But this was one of the journals that I was working in pretty consistently there for a while. I created this journal over on Patreon, and I just continued working on it. This is actually one of the ones that I've started to sort of pull away from, which is not necessarily what I want to do with all of these journals. So I did pull it out last night and started working in it again. This right here is something that I punched out using some alphabet punches that I bought off of eBay. Here they are. And I have really enjoyed using these actually in my artwork, but I have to make a conscious effort to remember to use them. I did just use them again last night, and I will show you. That's in a completely other journal, but I'll show you when I get to that point. But these are kind of a fun new addition to my art journal supply collection. Here I just pinned in a little Rolodex card. I haven't decided fully if I actually want to put it there or not, but I had started drawing a face underneath here and I didn't like it, and I much preferred the way that this looked sitting there over the face that I did not like. So we'll see if that eventually ends up being put in permanently, but it's been there a while, so I should probably glue that down. And this is where I added some more of the green acrylic ink. I put this ink in pretty much all of the journals, or most of them anyways, that I've been working in lately. I just did a big session where I added that ink into a bunch of my journals. Here is the girl from a couple of weeks ago, where I was experimenting with gouache. And this is actually the cover of this journal, where I had scanned it in before I made the journal because I liked it so much, and I used it as a collage element here. And this is from a different Patreon collage sheet. I'm not sure exactly which month. It was either July or August, I believe. And as you can see, now we're getting to the point in the journal where, though I've worked in it a little bit, I haven't done a bunch of faces. There's little bits here and there, but it's mostly collage and that sort of thing. And that's about it for this journal. I haven't really done the cover of this one yet. I just glued a piece of Chinese book paper down. The next journal I'm going to show you is actually the most recent addition to my journal collection, and it's the one I talked about in the last video when I was talking about making new journals because I felt like it. I found this piece of cardboard also in my bins that I was sorting through, and I know that I saved it to make a journal specifically because of the shape of it. And so I decided to actually make the journal, and I tried a little bit of a different binding than the styles I typically do, and I found that kind of fun. And one of the things I like about this journal so far is that I've been using the edges as my palette when I'm working on the pages. And it just is kind of interesting. I don't know why I like that so much, but in the future, I might consider making my covers significantly bigger than the pages because it's very convenient to just have that right there. And this was mostly made out of different scraps of paper. I had my scrap drawer and I was trying to quickly get rid of some pieces, so I used some of the larger ones that were in there, and of course it didn't really seem to help. I am never running out of scraps, no matter how desperate I seem to be to use them. I always seem to be making more, but that was kind of the intention for this journal. Here was one of the areas where I used the punches. And instead of the negative, like I showed you in the last example, this is the positive. And now I have the negative as well. There is that face again. I had it on a piece of paper from when I had printed multiples, and I had two of them side by side, so I just folded it in half and added it into the signature. Here you can see kind of the background of it. I just glued something over top of it. There's more of that green ink, and in this case, it bled through way more than I expected it to. This is a vintage book paper, and the paper must just not have liked the acrylic ink at all because it soaked straight through. I do not like the way it looks on this page, but on this page where it bled onto the photo, it actually looks kind of interesting. This is also from the September collage sheet on Patreon, as is this. I just went through and I glued in a bunch of images from that collage sheet. I like to do that just so I can continue working with it throughout the month. And we're kind of getting into signatures now that don't really have much on them. There's, again, that same image, but bigger. Because there are 4 signatures in this, and I was pretty much only working in the first one, and we're in the second one now. So this is just pages. So I'm just going to quickly show you what's on these because I'm not going to spend too much time just showing you blank pages. But I do like using papers that have interesting elements on them already, because in my experience, it's just a good way to make sure you're not getting blocked. That fear of the blank page can be very real for a lot of people, and making sure that your journal already has interesting things on it is a great way to deal with that. Got magazine pages in here, prints of my own artwork, book pages, pretty much anything I can fold to make a signature page. This was actually left over from making the other journal. It didn't fit, and I just liked the way that the composition was by itself, and so I just incorporated it into this one as well. Or instead of, I guess. And that would be it for this journal. And now we are on to the last journal in this little collection of journals. This is actually an altered book. I had found this book at a thrift store. It is a Victoria's Secret book, actually, and it's called Romantic Style. And I really just liked a lot of things about it. I liked the end papers, and I liked a lot of the images within the book. And so I took out some of the pages and added watercolor paper in instead, while also maintaining some of the original pages. I haven't actually worked on any of the book pages themselves yet, only the watercolor paper, but I do eventually intend to work on the original pages as well. This was actually another experiment with my handmade watercolors. And in this book specifically, there are a lot of those tests. So a lot of the pages aren't finished and they just have large swatches of watercolor. This is one I actually made yesterday. It's not even finished drying in the pans. That's how new this one is. And so as you can see, these are the types of pages that were originally in the book. And I do like the way that those look in contrast with my art. Some blank pages in here. There's another swatch page. Another. I would say pretty much none of the pages in this book are finished. And it has really turned into kind of a swatch book more than anything else. But I do still really enjoy this book, and every now and again I go back in and start drawing over top of the swatches to kind of turn them into their own actual standalone pages. There's another with that bright pink watercolor, and the reason for this, I wanted a very, very neon pink watercolor, and I had been looking for one to purchase, and I couldn't find one that was as bright as I wanted. The closest that I found was Opera Rose, and I believe I actually used Opera Rose in my last YouTube video, but it's not nearly as bright. Let me just do a little test here. This is Opera Rose water brush. And I'm just going to put it right next to this bright watercolor. And as you can see, it's not as neon and it's just bright. And I do like it, but really what I was looking for when I even purchased the Opera Rose was something that was this neon. And my reasoning for that is I really like using neons as mixing colors. Neon pink is one of my favorite reds because it's a little bit more like a magenta or a printer kind of color, and you get a lot more vibrant colors when you mix with it. So I was really happy with the way that this watercolor specifically turned out because it was exactly what I was wanting from it. And that is the last page in the journal. So I hope you enjoyed this little peek inside my current art journals. Once they are a little more complete, I do plan on doing more flip throughs where I go page by page and talk about each one. But for now, I just kind of wanted to give a brief overview because this video is probably already quite long and it would be way longer if I was picking apart each and every page. But thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. You can subscribe to see more videos like this or very different from this in the future. And until next time, happy creating!